Happy Tuesday, and we have Nimble with us. What is Nimble? We're going to find out, but it's pretty cool. Their mission is to prevent 1 million falls. Yes, 1 million falls, and they're doing things internationally and right in our backyard in Colorado. So stick with us while we learn more about Nimble and their mission. And with that, I'm going to turn over to Catherine.
Well, it's great to be here. I'm really excited to be in person again, and we're fully vaccinated and taking all the precautions, but it feels like that window of hope coming back to people in person again.
Yes.
Super excited about that. So we're excited to learn where Nimble is on that mission of eliminating 1 million falls. And they also have some really special news for our own home state here, Colorado. So really looking forward to that. So I would like to have each of them introduce themselves. And we have known Nathan for quite some time. And I just recently had the pleasure of meeting Ed and having a conversation with him. And these two people are brilliant. They're also extremely compassionate people who are really out to make a difference in the world. And when I say brilliant, let me start with Ed. Has a PhD in physics, turned Wall Street trader, turned health tech entrepreneur. So that tells you a little bit about his intellectual curiosity, I think, and the things that he brings to the table. So Ed, say hello to our audience. Tell them a little bit about who you are, your background, and why you started Nimble.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's great to be here. We appreciate you having us on. You hit the highlights. I'm sort of a data scientist by training, spent some time at Wall Street, and now I'm a health tech entrepreneur. So I like to talk about the fact that I do a lot of things well, but nothing exceptionally well. So I'm not actually that great at anything. Substitute in. So we're here with Nimble, and our mission is to prevent 1 million falls, like you said. And we believe that a lot of falls are preventable. Research supports that. And we've got a really unique way of doing so that we're really excited to share with everybody today. And then I'll let my colleague Nathan introduce himself.
Yeah, Dr. Nathan Estrada. I'm a physical therapist by training. Actually start off in sports medicine. And while it's fun to bring athletes back to activity, it's a whole other thing to bring an older adult back to life. And really fell in love with population health and empowering people to be their own solution and not be in this paternalistic way of going, here's all the things you should do. And once I kind of moved away from that, really realized it's far more about the older adult than it is about me as the provider. And how can we facilitate great behaviors there? And ultimately, I think I'm on a mission to show that aging is not less. Aging is far more than we give it credit for. And a lot of what we experience today is frankly just deconditioning. That's a behavior, not a disease. And let's go after that instead.
And that's a lot of how Nimble started. It's combining that technology and that passion for older adults that we share, and not wanting anyone to receive that call that says your loved one's fallen. So we're doing everything we can to prevent that.
Nathan, can you elaborate a little bit more on that deconditioned, what that means, and how can that affect people?
Yeah, it's super interesting. It's almost a uniquely modern culture issue of aging, to where we decided that when you retire, that you actually do less physically. There's actually no evidence to say that we should slow down in any way, shape, or form, or that it's required. I always like to look at the NASA studies of deconditioning, and take people to bed rest, and you say, hey, what happens? It's the same thing as when you're in space, and you find out that for every day you don't do anything, it's 4 days of strength training to regain the strength you lost. And you look at COVID, and it's a train wreck of older adults not moving. We get calls from our users who are walking around the coffee table 10 times in each direction to simply move because they've been homebound for so long. And it's kind of a travesty, because movement is actually where health and kind of wellness comes from, both physically and emotionally. And if you're not confident in your movement, you're not really living life anymore, which is why balance is so crucial.
I want to highlight something. I want to make sure I heard you correctly. You said for every 1 day in bed, it takes 4 days of strength training to get back to that baseline?
That's correct. And so think about it this way, Francis. If you go to the hospital and you have a 4-day hospital stay and we send that person to 16 days of rehab, we all celebrate, like, look what we did for that person. No, you just broke even. That person left rehab after 16 days, breaking even, just as sick as the day they got in the hospital.
It's really mind-boggling to think about that, and really for people like me who were family caregivers to think about the way that I managed my father, and when he was considered a fall risk. And we talked about that in a previous podcast with you, but I think we should talk about that too, the idea that someone might be a fall risk and what that does to them emotionally.
Yeah, I mean, fear of falling is the second greatest predictor of falls, right after history of falling. And that's why they go together. And if you don't live life confidently, you prevent falls in a very poor way. In other words, you start limiting your exposure to risk. Right? When you look at the packet you get from your doctor when you're high risk, that packet is simply instructions on how to live a smaller life. Right? And that's all it is remove all these things from your life, and then you have a decreased risk of falling. We kind of throw that out the window and go, actually, well, why don't we actually fill in the deficits? Why don't we improve your balance? Because when your balance improves, then your confidence follows that, rather than simply having people trade out their shoes that they love, remove all their throw rugs, and stop leaving their house. Get them empowered to step over thresholds, to challenge stairs, and start walking for a living.
So let me ask this question on behalf of all the family caregivers who are listening right now or listening later. And then Ed, we want to talk to you about what got you into this industry. The idea, Nathan, that wow. Yeah. First of all, our audience probably knows you by now, that you are filled with sound bites.
Yes.
Things that just catch our attention. The idea that the instructions the doctor leaves you with has you living a smaller life. I remember the day I brought my dad back from back surgery to their home, and the physical therapist had us remove all the throw rugs. My mom was in a fit because she had Alzheimer's and didn't know what was going on, and it was a change in her environment. But what do you do? How I mean, I would be terrified if there were rugs that he could trip on.
Yeah, see, that's the difference, though, is we let our fear of the environment make a different decision. In other words, hey, let's just make the environment sterile. Let's remove all the trip hazards, let's do all that. But let's talk about the natural consequence of removing risk from someone's life. Go to a skilled nursing home, and what you'll see is every person that walks in skilled nursing drags their feet because there's no consequence, right? But even the employees drag their feet because there's no consequence, because the body naturally goes to the lowest level of functional mobility that's required. And if there's no functional ability required, well, then that's your new baseline. So what we would say instead is, why don't we actually figure out the reasons why they're not lifting their feet? And it's almost always a reaction of people having a small decrease in balance and accepting that it's normal. Well, why don't we improve their balance 1 foot longer so they can step, so they can go over thresholds? Because when you remove danger, here's what you're doing. You're accepting that your environment that you're safe in is the only environment you can live in. What about outside? What about at your kid's house or your grandkids? What about the wedding that you wanted to go to? Those risks live there. And if those risks are outside of your house and you only feel safe inside your house, what do? You never leave.
And that's a really fundamental point. One of the things that we've come to learn and embrace at Nimble is that older adult wellness, when we think about health and wellness, it has to start fundamentally with balance and mobility. If older adults are comfortable in their ability to move, they're living bigger lives. They're going to see people. They're not socially isolated as much as they can. Their cardiovascular health is better because they're out and moving around. Once you lose that ability and that confidence to move, all of a sudden, like Nathan says, your life shrinks. And that's the biggest detriment to older adult wellness that we see, is when you start to live a smaller life. So we're out to try to prevent that.
Wow.
And give people an opportunity to live life to its fullest, to live a bigger life. And it actually, as I have talked to older adults in my lifetime and I ask them, what is it that you do? I often hear, just keep moving.
Yeah.
Just keep moving. Also, read and do things that keep your brain activated, but just keep moving, we
actually have a fun little story on that. Is early on in Nimble's days, we started partnering with a health system in Pennsylvania called Summit Health, very rural Pennsylvania. And we'd go out there and we would give these balance evaluations. And these people would be 75, 80 years old, and they would be off the chart, 90th percentile, 95th percentile. And finally I looked at one of them. I said, how are you guys all so great at balance? They said, well, we're all farmers. We carry 2 packs of 50-pound fertilizer on each shoulder every day, and we're out in the field. We never slowed down. And I think it's so important to see that, of just when you're moving and doing things and investing, you reap the benefits of that, and you can maintain a very high level of functioning.
I mean, that's exactly what it is. It's I think, Nathan, we've talked about this before, is that the minute someone determines that you're old, they wrap you in bubble wrap because, God forbid, you sprain and I don't know, you get a ding or a nick. It's like, it's almost worse than what we see as, infants growing up, right? We've almost gone to that over preventive stage of, well, we can't have anything happen at all, God forbid, like wrap them in bubble wrap, worse than I think a toddler. Like,
absolutely.
I mean,
and I will say, even if you look at Gen X, so a lot of Gen X and Gen Y parents were hover parents. There were a lot of hover parents. I was one of them. And I became a hover adult daughter to my dad. And looking back, I can see where that was not in his best interest. But at the time, I thought it was. I thought it was helping him. So one of the things we like to do here on Mavericks is make sure that people have education and they understand why these things matter. So it's not just a matter of keeping them physically safe. They're probably going to fall. They probably are. And as a matter of fact, and I'm sure you would agree with this, my dad did fall 4 times, and I use him as an example, but I hear these stories over and over. He did fall 4 times after we had gone through all of that, probably because he wasn't trained in balance.
Or deconditioned.
Right?
Or deconditioned, yeah. So Ed, I want to flip this back to you a little bit. Is why the shift? I mean, that's a big shift from Wall Street to tech healthcare startup.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah, follow the shiny objects. That's all. No, it's I think it was born out of a desire to have a greater impact in the world. And I think healthcare has always been fascinating. I always tell the joke that since I was a young kid, my mother was always like, you're going to go to be a physician, you're going to go to med school. And being the young teenager, sort of you rebel against that. And you say, well, that's the one thing I'm not going to go do.
Right.
And strangely enough, my brother and I both ended up in healthcare after a circuitous path. But no, so I was leaving Wall Street and trying to figure out what to do next, and kind of honed in on what I thought was impact I could have by marrying that technology and data, 2 things that I'm good at, with what I consider to be underserved populations. And 2 that came to mind were older adults and veterans, both of which I think have done great things, for our country and for all of us, but are largely forgotten and often kind of labeled and put into a corner. And so I happened to meet some of the early founders of Nimble. Dr. J.P. Farsi is a notable one, who is a now retired orthopedic spine surgeon who spent a lot of time understanding balance and finding optimal ways to train it, and had this huge passion for older adults and helping them to live healthier lives. The challenge was he knew nothing about technology. And so he could go to his clinic and he could treat 8 people a day, but there's millions of people falling. And so how do you go from that 8 people to those million? And the only way to do that is through technology. And so that's where I got very excited, was thinking about, wow, look at what we can do for this population that it knows how to use technology. 80% of older adults now have a smart device in their home, and they can learn just like you and I can learn. They can use things, and they want to use it, and they want to take control of their healthcare. But somehow our system kind of missed that. And we're lucky that people are starting to catch on now. But for a long time, it was sort of, well, my grandmother can't text, or my aunt, she can't use technology at all. They had this N=1 mentality that would forget, you'd forget that people could learn something new. And so that's where I got really excited when I saw, wow, technology is there, older adults' willingness is there, but nobody's ever tried to do this and impact this large amount of people, and got really excited. And so we were off to the races from there.
Wow. Yeah.
It's really fantastic, and something that we're seeing more and more of, I would say just in the last 5 years in the senior living industry and senior care in general, is the data science approach, like really gathering the data, looking at the data and making changes based on the data. So I love seeing that.
Right. And one of the important things there too that we've learned in our product is respecting the dignity of the older adult as we go through that. In other words, we're not a program that dictates to older adults, hey, here are the 5 things you have to do. Like, here are the 5 commandments of not falling, and if you don't do those, you're going to be punished. We meet older adults where they are. What do you want to do today? Are you worried about checking your balance? Do you just want to check in periodically? fine, come do that at Nimble. Do you want to work on it every day? Do you want to work on it twice a day? Whatever you want to do, we can meet you where you are. And I think that's such a critical element, because there's no such thing as an older adult. They're not all the same. Everybody's like you and I are all different. So you have a spectrum of needs. And all too often we look at older adults and say, well, we need to dictate these 5 points to them. And then we wonder why that program's not adopted.
Or fitting everybody in the same box. I mean, that's one of my biggest pet peeves, is that we have to fit into this box. Otherwise we don't know how to take care of them. And that's just the, actually the antithesis of what it means to take care of somebody, right? We have to acknowledge their uniqueness in order to build the best plan for that person. If we don't, we're going to have a shortcoming or do something that doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense. So I applaud that. I think that's a fantastic approach.
Thanks.
So for our audience, let's see, Nathan, if somebody wanted to take advantage of Nimmble's services, what would they do? What does it look like for them?
Yeah, well, first off, we're really excited that locally in Colorado, Nimble's already covered. So the Denver Regional Council of Governments, DRCOG, who's not actually a physician, but a group of area agents and agents, right, has sponsored our program to really meet this need, because community-based classes died during COVID. It wasn't safe to get together in this aggregated class. And so they partnered with us to go, let's not only fill that need, but let's actually blow it out of the water. Let's see if we can get 250% more people doing balance training in 4 months than in a normal year in Colorado.
Okay.
By the way, we're pretty close to 4,000 people, and historically there's only been 2,000 in every 12 months. And that's the crux of Nimble, and is really meeting that population need. And so people in Colorado can go to co.fallsfree.com and they can enroll. They're already waiting for them. So that's perfectly available. We're also available for different health plans at kind of the national level and some different geographies. We launched the country of New Zealand, which has been an intriguing process for us. But ultimately what we're about is getting people access to interventions that they enjoy, number one, that they can immediately gain benefit from. In other words, if you go to co.fallsfree.com, you can have a balance assessment in your first day of training within 10 minutes.
Wow.
And as a result of that, you don't have to wait for scheduling and hopping in your car and doing all those kind of logistical things. It's more about you in that moment. How can we meet that immediate need?
So let's connect the dots directly for people. That means that in Colorado, and is it in all of Colorado or just the Denver metro area? It is covered, meaning it is free to you.
That is correct. We actually have an internal belief at Nimble that older adults should not be charged for things that other people make money when bad things don't happen. Falls are a primary cost driver for the insurance companies for the state of Colorado. In fact, the state of Colorado has roughly $800 million in fall spend per year because we have 900,000 older adults now. Welcome to the new census data. So as a result of that, the spend is so much, we believe that the state or the local organizations or insurance should cover that. So we don't ask older adults to do it. It's fully covered. They can sign on there. It started off with the Denver metro area funded by that. We have an allotment that allows us to go broader than that. And we have aspirations to make it a statewide benefit for the next 2 years. Hopefully we can announce that that's actually success coming up. Call your senator, let them know that it's important. It'll help us.
Well, I think you hit on something right there though, Nathan, that again, we've got to start looking at what programs benefit the older adults, not that reactive care, right? Because you said it, the cost driver for healthcare systems, for insurance companies, are those falls. If we can spend less in a proactive manner to prevent those falls, it's a no-brainer. I mean, it makes total mathematical sense, at least.
Francis, our ROI is more than 10 to 1. The hard part about it is when you look at it,
that's insane.
It's craziness that we normally help people when they have a problem, and we make ourselves feel better by calling it prevention, right? If someone fell, you're not preventing anything. You're mitigating from that point on. Prevention starts before it happens.
Yeah.
And the only way to get people before it happens is to make it a universal benefit.
Right.
And not wait until, a hailstorm to buy hail insurance.
Right. Can I ask a question that you guys might not have to answer, but we've talked about it before, is are any of the hospital systems worried about how this can impact their revenue?
We haven't spoken with a lot of hospital systems recently, I'd say.
Okay. I mean, again, if it's too, again, I don't mean to be controversial, but back of my head's like, well, this is interesting because I could see how this can crisscross with especially some of the larger chains that do a lot of orthopedic repairs for older adults.
Yeah, I think what you're bringing up is the natural misincentive of a fee-for-service healthcare system.
Right. Agreed. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
For service, regardless of whether it's hospital at the provider level, they get paid for the more work they do. And so
Right.
it's hard for a fee-for-service hospital to be a customer or for us, to sell for them because they're not incentivized to decrease the cost of surgery. And so I wouldn't say that there's any specific hospital system. I think all hospital systems struggle with balancing their profit and loss with preventative medicine. Preventative medicine always has a negative impact on fee-for-service billing. And so we just frankly don't sell to them anymore.
So that's a deeper conversation than obviously to looking at the fee for service as a overall whole, because I'm for being as proactive as possible, because with where we're seeing the number of older adults, not only in Colorado, but, internationally and nationally as well, we have to have a more proactive approach. We have to start thinking beyond just these reactive systems that we have today.
Yeah, that's what we found great success in the health plan market, in the Medicare Advantage world, because those people are very incentivized to reduce costs. Every single fall you saves them a significant amount of money. And so they're also incentivized now to start delivering care into the homes of older adults, to start making that connection with the older adult, because all of a sudden they're now able to access them and they realize, hey, we could be a trusted partner in their care as well. And so we found great success there, which we're really excited about.
And I think systems theory says every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. So what you're doing is changing the system, and this is what we need to change the system and really get outside the box. I'm going to go back to a little bit of the kind of connecting the dots for our audience who might want to partake in the services. So if they go to the website, and I encourage you to, if you're listening, co.fallsfree.com. What happens? Nathan, you said they'll get an assessment, but Nathan's not coming out to my house in the next 10 minutes to do it. So can you?
You wouldn't want that.
He might, I don't know.
We're down here, then.
It's intriguing because literature actually validates that a subjective balance assessment, like we do in our system, using our digital tool, is just as accurate at predicting fall risk as like an in-person assessment. In other words, it's really about finding the general fall risk factors. So we start off by letting people answer the broader scope of fall risk, like do you need help getting out of a chair? Do you take medications for mood or sleep? You're having trouble with curbs? Are you fearful? And we look at all those factors, and then we combine that with physical testing, and then allowing someone to do a brain game, and then saying, hey, what happens if you do those together? Because by the way, we don't fall when we're focused, we fall when we're distracted. And so we immediately allow us to get through a risk assessment and for people to experience that benefit of doing a brain game while they happen to be doing a movement. And then we build upon that knowledge and that ability over time. And when you do it that way, number one, it's fun because it's more about the brain than it is the body. Because the first two stages of balance are actually brain related, not even physical. If you don't feel yourself falling, no amount of physical health matters. You fall like a tree. And the only thing that you knew you fell is because you hit the ground. And that's unacceptable. Why don't we actually work on that sensation? And you can immediately start working on that. And the only way to really effectively do that is to have a brain game while you're physically moving. And then we test people as they perform. So Catherine, if you and Francis were doing Nimble side by side, you'd have two different programs because you're two different people.
That's
kind
cool.
of acting at two different rates. And so by meeting the user at the individual level, we can meet their needs longer and bring them farther along the continuum of balance. Because it's not just about making one leap forward. It's about getting people out of the high-risk category altogether. And Ed and I, when we look at our product, it's not just about going through a program. It's about what are your goals? And how can we help you meet your aspirations? And by the way, when your aspirations change, we need to change with you.
And Nathan said something really important earlier. I want to make sure I emphasize, which is that you can go to co.fallsfree.com and you can be started, like you said, with an assessment and your first day of balance training in 10 minutes. This is not a get in your car or have to make an appointment or have to wait to be scheduled. If you're out there and you're concerned about your balance, or you're just curious, or you have a loved one that you're curious about, I mean, literally, it's as easy as we could make it. It's 10 minutes, and you'll have a starting point, and then it's up to you to determine what you'd like to do from that starting point, and we help you choose the program that's right for you.
So is it video-based then?
It's not, and the reason why it's not is brain games have to be interactive. And so what we do is we have, trivia or different types of kind of cognitive or brain challenges that allow someone to go, hey, this is a lot of fun. And during that fun, we allow the body then to just do simple movements that recreate balance reactions. So when you're losing your balance, you're not doing a back flip. You're just stepping to regain, or you're grabbing something. So by allowing the brain to be in this distracted state, and then for you to constantly move, you're relearning your balance sensation. You're relearning your reflexes. And you know what's available to you when you stumble? The reflex. So no amount of education on my side of what to do in that moment is going to make a hill of beans a difference. If you have to think about what Nathan said in balance class, you just fell. But if the reflex is available, it's always there to protect you. And that's actually the primary mechanism by which Nimble works, is we improve the reflex. So that way, next time you experience something that happens to all of us, which is stumbling, you now have the ability to automatically respond and not have to respond with some kind of thought, because it's just too slow.
Is there an age? What is this open to anybody, like 40 older, 50 older, 60? What is the
in Colorado, it's 60 and above. Obviously, at our Medicare clients, it's 65. In New Zealand, it's actually 50 and above, because the traditional Maori people in New Zealand actually age differently than our European colleagues. And so we actually start them at 50 on the preventative side, so that they never fall in the high risk category altogether.
Do you think that'll ever shift in the US to getting it to maybe 45 or 50-year-olds, that we start pushing it down lower, or is that a bigger discussion?
But Francis, the problem is motivation, right? When do you start to get motivated to do balance training? Well, when you see other people around you falling and see the consequences, that's a big motivator. But when you physically feel different, that's the second piece there. Most of us don't feel like our balance is significantly improved in our 50s because we're still convinced we're 30. And as a result of that, when you look at that, it's really when people hit about 60 to 65 that people start to feel, wow, I'm not as safe or secure as I want to be. And my parents just fell. I never want to be a faller. And that's where motivation and need meet. And so, yes, you should be training from your 30s if you want to know. It's just hard to get motivated when there's all the other distractions and you don't feel as impaired.
That makes sense. Wow.
So Ed, what do the next 12 months at Nimble look like?
Oh, great question. A lot of falls prevented. We're expanding quite a bit. Our team's grown from, in the last 6 months, it's probably doubled. We're at about 18 people now.
Wow.
We love being part of the Denver ecosystem, and we're trying to spread our message as broadly as we can, to local residents of Colorado here, but also to nationwide Medicare Advantage plans, and trying to impact people at a population level. So in other words, instead of the kind of one-on-one type care that a lot of health systems focus on, we're focused on how can we get this to 200,000, 300,000, 500,000 people. And so we're really excited about that. And that's causing us to have to develop some new capabilities. We're becoming a lot of a marketing company as well as a technological company, because we have to make older adults aware of this benefit. And the one who's best at doing that is our company. In other words, we don't want to outsource that to a health plan. We want to be the ones communicating to their older adults to help them become aware of that. So we're looking for a lot of talented people. We're hiring like crazy. It's been strange with COVID because half of the people in the company we've never actually met face to face. It's a little bit strange, but we're coming back together here shortly. But
Cool.
So we focus on that mission of 1 million falls and that older adult health and wellness, and how can we be that trusted brand, that trusted health partner, that when an older adult is worried about balance or falling, and then in the future other things, they think about Nimble first. And so we're honored to have that position, and we're excited to grow.
So it sounds like too, you guys are doing a lot of education as well. It sounds like.
Exactly.
You do, because it requires, we're helping people with their physical balance skills, their confidence, and their true mobility, right? To be able to stand up from a chair without needing your arms, to be able to walk in low light environments, and to be able to interact with the world while you're still moving. But there's still other factors for fall risk, like, hey, what if you're on 4 medications that increase your fall risk? Go talk to your doctor. Have you had your vision checked? How's your foot health? And when you look at all those other aspects, what we use is cognitive behavioral training to really encourage people by a positive message of, here's what you could do to reduce your risk of falls. This is your empowerment. And these are the actions that you might choose to take. And this is the desired outcome that you could get from that. How does that sound? And then we let them act upon that. And then suddenly 72% of Nimble users are talking to their doctor about fall risk, when nationally that average is about 28%.
Wow.
Wow. Well, you're up to some big things here, and we're excited to see it. Love the upstream thinking, and that's really what you're doing. You're catching it upstream so we don't get to that point. I wish I would have known about this when my father was still around, where I could make an impact, but I'm excited to be able to share it with other people now and create an impact. So for those of you listening, if you have an older adult in your life, if you are someone who has some balance issues or is at all concerned about this, please go to co.fallsfree.com. It is free to you in Colorado right now. And you're going to get some great people to be working with here and get some autonomy. Keep your autonomy. That's really what we all want, is our autonomy, right?
That's right.
And yeah, we appreciate you guys taking some time this afternoon. It's been a pleasure listening and learning about your story. I can't wait to see what next big hurdle and jump you guys are going to take, because I think it's fantastic. You're impacting New Zealand and Colorado, and it's going to keep expanding faster and faster. I truly hope people take advantage of the program, because I am a firm believer the more proactive we can be, the better we're going to be. So really appreciate that. Any final message you want to share with our viewers?
No, I think the biggest thing for us is most falls are preventable, and we should never accept it as a normalcy in our life, in the life of our loved ones. And we should be tenacious on dispelling myths of aging that are destructive. And aging is not anywhere near less. It's about doing more and engaging the world in a more productive way and continue to add value. And as a result of that, empowerment matters. You can control your balance. It's something you can improve on no matter what age you're in. So make sure that you're taking control of what you can control, improve your balance, decrease your risk of falls, and live a great life.
Well, that's fantastic. And with that, we are going to say thank you. We really appreciate you sharing all of your knowledge, your information, and we look forward to great things from Nimble. So
appreciate it. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. We will definitely follow you and have to bring you back on probably another 6 months here and keep an update of the progress. So have a wonderful rest of your week, and thank you guys.
You as well. Bye-bye.
Bye.